Hello, got people coming in the chat room. Kick ass. Everything seems to be working. Hello, David. Hello, Shannon. Bruce Press, how are you, sir? Al Lake, welcome. Dennis, Justin, you've got monsters. Very good. Very good. Yes, you guys hear me too. You also hear me muttering to myself as, old people are always doing. Of course, I've been muttering to myself a long time. When I was young, way before it was cool to mutter to yourself, I was muttering to myself. I still am. This is actually me muttering to myself right now. We've got Mignon Fogarty in the green room, hanging out, waiting to come on and interact with all of you lovely people. Hello, Brian Craig. Good compliment from YouTube today. Surprising. Good chunk. Well, there's all three of you. It's great. We are coming in loud and clear. You guys were there last week for the Bronson Pin Show episode. Again, that was nobody's fault but mine. I am a living Led Zeppelin song. Literally forgot to flip one of the switches on the software, and that wound up being a bit of a problem. But Bronson Pin Show was so cool. I have asked him if he'll come back in November, and I hope he will. Because we have a great show with him lined up for the Wicked Witch of the West. It's going to be very great. Bruce, of course I'm excited. Of course I'm energetic. I have been moving books all day. I've been moving books for basically 13 days. I am pooped, but this guest today, one of my favorite people, one of the original podcast masters, somebody who's been in the game. There's all these new people in the game now who kind of think they invented podcasting. And then there's all of us like, wait a minute, we've been doing this for 15 years. Hey, Ian Shields, how are you? All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're not ready yet. Let's give it till 4:01, everyone. 4:01 my time. That's 1 minute after the hour. As Casey Kasem would say, 1 minute after the hour, we've got a long distance dedication. Casey, I would like this one to go out to Grammar Girl. Now I don't know any songs that have a grammar effect in them. I'll have to work on that. Let's see. Yeah, Ian, long time no here. Okay, everyone, we're going to go live in a moment. Just give a few minutes for people to filter in here. Turn that off. I will go live myself. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Monster of the Week. As I mentioned, we had a little snafu last week, but that's okay. We're going to give it a minute for the laggards to shuffle their way into the chat room and hang out. David Roman, welcome. How are you? And then we are going to go live. Shannon Chavaria, hello. Good crowd today. Good crowd today, everybody. Here we go. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time. Let's get into it. Welcome to Monster of the Week. This episode is about that literary lech, Joe Fox. He is from the 1998 movie You've Got Mail. Back when we all had to listen to that annoying dial-up tone, and before the internet was known as a place where we can all be horribly awful to each other. It was an innocent time, if you will, and it's kind of fun. So let me see where I'm at here. Boom, got the script set up. My guest this week is coming up in a minute, but she is Mignon Fogarty, and she is going to be talking at least a little bit about her game, Peeve Wars. We're going to ask her about that when she comes on. Of course, I, being a author, I pimp my books every episode as well, and the book I am pimping this week has literally nothing to do with You've Got Mail, but is my latest. It is called The Stone Wolves. It was supposed to be a novella, which is a 40,000-word book. When J.C. Hutchins and I got together, it turned out to be 144,000 words. So it's a big novel, let alone even being counted as a novella. This is a gritty, high-action space adventure that dives into how military troops can be discarded and forgotten by their nations, but they still have to carry the scars of combat with them until the day they die. So it's a bit of an adventurous romp with a realistic, dark undertone to it, and deals with some issues that a lot of my friends are dealing with to this day. So, about to bring on my guests. Let's get those out of the way. Here is the intro, and then we're going to be on. Mignon Fogarty is better known as Grammar Girl, the 5-time winner of the Best Education Podcast and the Podcast Awards, an inductee into the Podcasting Hall of Fame, and the founder of the Quick and Dirty Tips Podcast Network. She is the author of 7 books about language, including the New York Times bestseller, Grammar Girl's Quick and Dirty Tips for Better Writing, which I not only have, I've given away on my show several times. She has also appeared as a guest expert on the Oprah Winfrey Show and the Today Show. Mignon, welcome to Monster of the Week. Say hello. Oh, unmute her. Gosh darn it. One of these days. No, say hello.
Hello.
Hi. She's not muted at all.
I'm so excited to be here. One of my oldest podcasting friends, Scott. It's so great to be with you. And then to hear you talk about JC Hutchins, another old friend, just like old home time.
It's old home time. And those of you who are my old time, long time fans may recall this, but Mignon was one of the key promoters for my book Ancestor when that came out, when it was a small independent indie press, Canadian press. And through the campaign we put together, that hit #1 in horror sci-fi on Amazon, was #2 fiction book in the world, only behind a Harry Potter novel. And Mignon was very instrumental in sharing that with her wonderful podcast episode on comma splices and kind of taking me behind the woodshed to tell everybody that how I did comma splices were bad. But it was great for selling the book. So thank you very much. Appreciate that.
And it was one of my favorite episodes. And I don't know if you can see on my bookshelf here, but I have Contagious right here. I have your book. So I've enjoyed your books over the years.
All right, now we're going to get into it. First of all, let's talk a little bit about, I have to go to, boom. Tell us a little bit about Peeve Wars. All the guests get to pimp something. You're pimping Peeve Wars. Let's hear it.
Yes, I am so excited. So I have a card game called Peeve Wars. You can see like Grammar Girls Peeve Wars. And the goal is to amass an army of pet peeves, grammar peeves, and annoy your opponents to death. And it is a fun game. I made it with Len Peralta, who is a big, well-known in the podcasting world for his art, and a friend of mine named Joe Kisenweather, who's a mathematician who designs games for a living. And it's wild. Like what makes games actually fun is the math behind him. It's a very mathy thing. And so I was thrilled to have Joe on board to make the game so fun because it's different every time you play. And I'll give you an example of some of the peeves. So very unique is one of the pet peeves. Everyone hates that. And it's got an annoyance value of 4. And there can be only one. So when you play, you're very unique. Everyone else has to discard theirs because there can be only one. And then filler word makes me laugh because it has an annoyance value of 0. And it does nothing, just like a filler word, like it just does nothing but take up space in the game. It's worthless. Literally, is the most annoying card in the game. It's an annoyance value of 6. And then another one of my favorites is double negative, which doubles the annoyance value of any other peeve. So you amass this army of peeves and then you attack your opponents and they defend with grammar heroes. So we have the Noah Webster card. He's like definitely a grammar hero. And then fans of the Grammar Girl podcast will obviously recommend Squiggly and Aardvark, who are 2 grammar heroes. They're characters I use a lot in example sentences in my podcast. So the reason I'm finally talking, I've had this game since 2014, but I never promoted it, but because I didn't like how it was packaged because the instructions were separate. But I found out a way to package it now. So the instructions are inside the box. So you open the box out flat and the instructions are all there. And so it's one nice contained little package that you can just give someone and everything they need is there. So it makes a much better gift than having the booklet separate. It's the instructions, you might lose it, but it's just the box and it has everything you need. It's at The Game Crafter. It's called Peeve Wars. Just Google it and I think it would make a great Christmas gift.
And as A and I've been learning, we're very glad we just finished shipping out our book, The Gangster. And we're glad we did because the postal office is hitting a slowdown and there are supply chain issues. So people have been saying, if you want to order your Christmas presents and have them shipped, you should do that ASAP, like right now. So here is a great one for all of your fellow word nerds out there. The filler card, I should have that one framed because that's a thing I have to deal with all the time, trying to make things different when you write all the stories. There's a lot of filler words that need to be yanked out of there. Now, let's get into the biggest problem of the world right now, which is you've got mail. Let's discuss this. First of all, I want to know, why did you choose Joe, the Bookstore Butcher Fox, as your monster for Monster of the Week?
Well, you asked me to think of a monster, and honestly, I don't watch a lot of monster movies. Those aren't generally my thing. And I thought, who in a movie? Who or what in a movie did I have a visceral reaction negatively to? And I just kept coming back to Joe Fox in You've Got Mail, the horrible owner of the big chain bookstore. And, it's funny, and we'll talk about why. He's not really a monster, he's a villain. But I rewatched it last night and I hate him even more. I remember why I hate him. So he puts independent bookstores out of business, and he puts Meg Ryan's bookstore out of business, but he revels in it. He laughs about it. He like in the boardroom, he's like going, we put another one out of business. He's like happy. And he lies through the whole movie, like to the very last scene. He's lying about everything. And he's just not a good person. So he, in my mind, is a monster because he kills bookstores. And even though technically I would say he's not actually a monster, I'd say he's monstrous. He's monstrous in his behavior.
He is. And of course, back then he was a stand-in for Jeff Bezos, who has gone on to be, far more successful. I think at one point the richest man of all time, and also far more problematic in a lot of ways. But you can't, I'm not sure you could make a cuddly rom-com about Jeff Bezos right now. But back then, Tom Hanks standing in for Jeff Bezos seemed to work pretty well.
Right. And I mean, a lot of people have said, well, now Tom Hanks would have been put out of business by Amazon. So the big Fox bookstore, would be no more either. Probably would have gone the way of Borders or something like that.
Something along those lines.
He got his due.
Now, one thing I found while I was looking up some details on the show is I was a little bit staggered for just how big of a hit this monstrous rendition of Tom Hanks was. The budget for the movie was $65 million. Adjusted for inflation, that's $150.3 million, $20 million more than Ant-Man, $10 million more than Captain America. And then how much it made is kind of amazing. The box office, $250.8 million in 1998. Adjusted for inflation, $580 million. That is not only more than Iron Man. That is not only more than Avengers Age of Ultron. If it was a Marvel property, You've Got Mail would be the number 5 top grossing Marvel movie of all time. So Tom Hanks as a villain clearly drew them in. Do you think, was it his villainous performance? Was it his monstrous approach to the literary world? What was it about his performance that contributed to this box office?
Well, I kind of think it was how cute Meg Ryan was that did a lot of it.
That's true.
But he, it's funny because so many people, I feel like maybe I'm not normal here because so many people think it's just a wonderful rom-com and it's such a sweet love story. And he was the dashing, man who won her heart in the end. And I can't get past the fact that he put her out of business. Maybe because I am a business owner, that it hit me a little harder than it would an average person. But I just don't see anything redeeming about him. And but that amazes me. I don't know how they could have spent so much. It's not like there were special effects. It looked like they filmed it just in a city. It wasn't special visually in any way. I don't know how they spent all that money.
I think that was back in the day of stars getting 10, 15, even $20 million a picture. So my guess would be the majority of that budget was spent on Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan, who were both big stars. I think Meg Ryan was a bigger star than Tom Hanks, but I should have looked this up. This might be post Sleepless in Seattle. But that could be that's definitely part of it. So, but one of the interesting things about You've Got Mail for being this giant box office blockbuster is it does have sort of a bad guy, but not really a bad guy, who is one of the romantic leads in this rom-com. So what is, in your experience, and you, of course, so much breadth of knowledge in the world of literature, what is it, how do you tell a story that doesn't have a bad guy? How do you have a non-villain in the movie? What was your take on that?
Yeah, I think the circumstance was the villain. And it was really, it was supposed to be a character development story. So you were really supposed to see that Joe Fox started out as this horrible, awful person. And through life experiences and love, he became a better person. That is definitely the message. And, they say that a story is very powerful when the characters change. Like every viewer, reader wants to see that. That's important. And there has to be conflict. And there was lots of conflict between the two characters. They were battling over their businesses and like verbally attacking each other a lot. So there's a lot of conflict. And, supposedly, I get, okay, like he changed a little, but he just took his terrible business manipulativeness and, in my view, manipulated Meg Ryan until she supposedly fell in love with him. But I don't know. I'm not buying it.
It is a psychological manipulation film. He is laying waste to mom and pop shops all about the country. He's putting bookstores out of business. He's putting people on the soup line, if you will. And then he still winds up being the person who gets the business win, who gets the girl who happens to be one of his victims. There's a lot to be said for this being a whole bunch darker than people give it credit for.
Yeah, and I think an interesting question too. So they correspond through America Online, through a chat room, through email, and then so is the question, and he's beautiful, he's eloquent and understanding in his writing, and then in real life he's just a real jerk. So I think the movie is making the case that when you're writing anonymously on the internet, you are able to show your true self. That it's who you really are when you're writing anonymously. And I think there's the whole flip side, that it allows you to pretend to be someone you're not. And it's a performance that's completely separate from who you are in the real world. So I think that's a real debate around the movie. Like, which is it? Which version of him was real?
And we're seeing
I think the one in real life is real.
We're seeing a lot of that now. When people can write anonymously online, we tend to see their true self. It's a lot of the concept of the drunk you is the true you, or the drugged out you is the true you. The anonymous internet troll, that's who you really are, or you wouldn't be doing that. And he was kind of maybe a precursor to that. One of the things we talked about when we were emailing about this movie, and I was so delighted when you picked this, that Joe Fox as your monster, is you were mentioning something about the Mandela effect with this movie. And I didn't look it up because you said it. I'm like, that's going to be fascinating. But I understand there's a whole side theory or fan fiction theory about this movie, something to do with false memories.
My mind was completely blown last night when I rewatched this movie. So I remember an ending where, he puts her bookstore out of business, and then he has his big bookstore. And I remember an ending scene where she is now working in his bookstore, and she's doing children's story hour in his store like she did in her store. And one of her employees that worked for her is now working there and is sort of walking around in the background. And it didn't happen. And at the end, I was watching with my husband, Pat, and I'm like, this isn't the end. This isn't what happened. And then, so the credits start rolling, and I'm like, well, maybe it's one of those interspersed scenes in the credits. We'll just watch all, it's probably here. We get to the very end of the credits, and it's not there. So of course I go to the internet and I Google, "You've Got Mail, alternative ending," and it doesn't exist. So but there are many, many other people who remember the same ending. We all remember the same thing happening. And what's so weird is one of the reasons that I get so angry about Joe Fox is, in my memory, not only did he put her out of business, but then she goes and works for him as like an employee in his big box bookstore. And that made me angry, is how I remember it. But there is no evidence at all that ending happened. And I found a blog post where a woman said she emailed Nora Ephron, the writer of the story, had a website that had a form you could submit. And she asked her and got a message back that said there's never been another ending to the movie. And yet there are many, many people who have the same memory. And there's a scene in the movie where she's reading in her own bookstore, and people say, well, maybe you're conflating that, you're remembering it wrong, and that scene is what you're really remembering. But no, I know it ended differently. I know it. And there's a name for this kind of false memory called the Mandela effect.
Okay.
because it's named after the fact that a lot of people thought Nelson Mandela died in prison in the 80s, but he didn't. He got out of prison, and I think he died in the 90s. But a lot of people think they remember that he died in prison in the 80s. And there are other instances of this. I've come up across it before. So I am also convinced, along with many other people, that I was taught to spell the word dilemma with an N, Dilemna.
Wow, I never heard of that one.
It's not how it's spelled, and nobody has ever found any proof that it used to be spelled that way. There were school books that taught it that way that were wrong, like nothing. But you can find hundreds, thousands, way more than hundreds. You can find thousands and thousands of people who believe they learned to spell it with an N. So when I was researching that for Grammar Girl, I came across the Mandela effect. And so when it came up again with You've Got Mail, I'm like, there it is again. This false memory thing is so weird.
And so that even dives deeper into the darkness that is Joe Fox, that there is psychological manipulation woven into the milieu of this movie that reaches out to the audience and makes them believe a thing that didn't actually happen. Do you think could that have started with somebody doing a blog post, somebody saying, talking about this scene? In your guesstimate, can a false memory like that occur simultaneously in multiple different people? Or do you think there's a kernel of that and then it spreads and somebody, as soon as they hear it, it's locked in, then it goes on to the next person, et cetera?
Well, it was just so weird because before I looked it up, I described to Pat, I'm like, this is what happened. And I said in very exquisite detail. And then I read and saw other people had blogged about, and I haven't looked at anything about You've Got Mail for probably a decade. I still wonder if maybe it was in a trailer for the movie or something like that. I would bet real money that existed, that I saw it. It's just that in my mind, like I can visualize it. It's just the strangest thing. It has to exist somewhere.
A and I found that a lot. We go back and for a show we do every month called Story Smack, we talk about a movie. And for this show as well, you go back and you watch something you haven't seen in 20, 25 years. And it's like, whoa. Your first initial reaction, of course, is, okay, that didn't hold up. Or like, holy cow, does this still hold up really well? Which we usually talk about when you go back to practical special effects. Okay, that still looks good 25 years later because it was a real item and it doesn't look fake or CGI. But going back and rewatching things, you're convinced there are scenes in the movie that you remember clearly that aren't there. If it's just a personal experience, I sort of get that. But if it's everybody else out there having the same kind of recollection, that's a little spooky. You might say that's a little monstrous. I'm not sure. It's kind of dark.
Right. And because I had a different experience because we were talking about monsters, I went and rewatched The Maze Runner because I remembered that one of the few movies with monsters in it that I've watched. And that, it turns out, was also a false memory because I had never seen the movie. I had read the book, and then apparently I saw many, many trailers for it.
Okay.
So I started watching it, and I'm like, I actually haven't seen this movie before. But but certain scenes were familiar because I had seen them in the trailers. So, in that case, I'm fully able to accept that, yeah, I thought I'd seen the movie and I didn't. But to have this memory that just isn't there is just really, I was just blown away.
And a lot of times trailers get put out before the movie reaches final cut. So they get down to their principal photography. They cut a trailer, they get it out because they have a release date. Or at least they used to have a release date that was 6 to 8 months out. They got to start getting in front of people. So they will often use footage that doesn't make it into the final cut of the movie when you do your reshoots. But for this satanic movie known as You've Got Mail, with the dark demonic force that is Tom Hanks / Joe Fox, apparently there's none of this in the trailer. That's what you've seen so far, is that Meg Ryan reading the children's story at the end of the movie is not in the trailer.
I haven't watched the trailers, but you're right. Joe's so evil. He's just, wooing it to mess with us.
I'm already getting ideas for a story because there's always, there's particularly from the early 30s, there are a lot of movies that came out and were very well known, not necessarily Wizard of Oz hits, but they're gone. The main print they're gone. They have eroded. They were thrown away, a good 30, 40, 50 years before the advent of digital reproduction. And these movies are gone forever. And all you've got is recollections of people talking about the movie and not the movie itself. You can move that forward into a modern day where you've got something like that disturbing last scene of You've Got Mail, but maybe somebody makes it go away. See, this is what I do when I think about a book. I just start rambling about stuff. So I'm not rambling. Trivia for you, since you've watched this movie or just reviewed it recently. Do you know what You've Got Mail is based on?
No.
I was shocked to learn this, to show you how much people being people are the same as you go through time. The movie is based on a 1936 play by Hungarian playwright. And the play is called Parfumeri, which I'm probably mispronouncing, but it's about two bickering coworkers who don't realize they're each other's pen pals. Almost 100 years old, predating the internet, or at least when this internet was made, by 60 years. But that's just people when you can hide behind anonymity.
That is wonderful. And I had wondered when I was watching, when I went into it, it was made, I think, in 1993. And I was thinking, is this going to just seem really hokey? Is this going to hold up?
Yeah.
And, except for the dial tone, dialing into AOL and the old computers, every single bit of it held up. It's just the human experience.
Does that dial tone, when you watch the movie and hear that dial tone, do you get kind of like, like digital PTSD from that? Because it was just waiting for it to click through. Did that bring back memories when the internet was new?
It did. Yeah. It was just it was a weird sound to hear again. You don't hear that very often anymore.
My trippy experience with AOL, and I literally haven't heard anyone call it America Online in a very long time. And you said that, I'm like, wait, no. Oh, that's right. AOL is America Online. Okay, I get that. When I go see my parents or I have to troubleshoot for my parents' internet stuff, email stuff, they still have an active AOL account. And I don't have to hear the dial tone, but I get to see that stupid mailbox icon all the time. And it's
my mom too.
Yeah, she's still on AOL.
Email address.
Are you also? Do you have to do the troubleshooting for your mom?
I don't. No, actually, I'm not the one for that, so that's good.
That's very helpful. Going sort of related to the Mandela effect. So part of the commonality in this movie between Tom Hanks and his character Joe Fox is Joe Fox is obsessed with Godfather and frequently quotes the film, occasionally incorrectly. And according to IMDb, and Tom Hanks is a real-life Godfather aficionado, even quotes from the film too. That's another thing that's sort of a Mandela effect type thing, which is the misquoting of a quote from a famous movie. Frankly, Scarlett, I don't give a damn. Indy, throw me the whip. Those kind of things. Is that also sort of a Mandela effect when people are sort of misquoting en masse?
I wouldn't call it a Mandela effect. I would just call it remembering a little differently. It is hard to remember how things are said. I've looked up quotes and been surprised that they weren't how I remembered them myself. There's one, it's Kathy Bates in a movie, and I remember it. She's telling the woman she's hinting that the woman should kill her abusive husband. And I remember it as her saying, good people die every day, or good people have accidents every day, or something like that. And I went to look it up once, and it's quite different from what I remember. I'm definitely paraphrasing what she said.
Well, this is, it's very interesting. I'm going to go ahead and roll with the concept that there is a supernatural element that has sublimated or erased the end of You've Got Mail, because that makes it a whole lot darker and a whole lot more fun. Any other 90s movies that you've gone back and had a moment to rewatch that have kind of thrown you off? A and I just watched Top Gun again, and that movie does not hold up well to my memories at all. It's like you go back in memories, it's still a super fun movie to watch. It's delightful to see all those actors and actresses in a much younger age, but frankly, it's a terrible movie. It's incredibly rushed. There's very little character development. It's so choppy, and it's like you go back and watch it and like, this is not good at all, but I still love it.
Oh, not really. There's another movie I really love that I haven't watched in a while, but I put out a call to ask people like who was a character that they thought was a villain that was portrayed as not a villain in the marketing or in the movie. Mm-hmm. And the movie is My Best Friend's Wedding, which I loved. And Julia Roberts was in it, and I forget the other characters, but there was a girl. So her friend, Julia Roberts' male friend, was getting married, and she realized when he was getting married that she was actually in love with him, and then she tries to break up him and his fiance.
Mm-hmm.
And so she befriends the fiance, whose name is Kimmy, who is hilarious. It's a blonde, like chipper Kimmy, and tries to like sow doubt in her toward her fiance so she can get the man. And one of my Twitter friends said, yeah, like Julia Roberts in that movie was an absolute monster. She's a villain, you know, the whole thing she spends trying to break up this couple.
Mm-hmm.
And you're supposed to view her as the so it's like a rom-com, like the romantic lead, but no, she's just a bad person. So
I go back I'll have to go back and rewatch Mystic Pizza at some point. And we're completely off the topic of You've Got Mail, but that is a very, very disturbing early Julia Roberts movie when she was first on her ascent to becoming the it person of acting and the highest paid person in Hollywood for a couple of years. That when you go back and there's a whole lot of taking advantage of teens going on in that movie, and it is very dark. And the only thing it was missing was a straight up murder. Other than that, Mystic Pizza had just about everything that you could think of. We have unfortunately someone in the chat room is very sad. Bronson Pinchot is not on tonight, but we will get him rescheduled. We just got. I've never had digital eggs thrown at me before. Check this out, you guys. This is fantastic. Mrs. Chick, we will get him back on, I assure you, at some point. I'm sorry you're disappointed. But Mignon, anything else that you want to tell it? You have so much stuff going on all the time, so many things going on, so many eggs in your dozen egg container, if you will go with that analogy. Is there anything else going on that people should check out with you? Where should they go for podcasts? Where should they go for books, etc.?
Yeah, well, we just celebrated the 15th anniversary of the Grammar Girl podcast. It's hard to believe I've been doing it 15 years, and you have too. And it's led to so many, for both of us, it's led to so many amazing things, the books, the book tours. You came to my book tour in San Francisco. I saw pictures of that. That was fun. So I'm still, these days, I'm still focusing very heavily on the podcast. It comes out every week. And when it started, it was maybe 3 minutes long every week. And now we're up to, 12, 18 minutes. Now it has 2 segments every show. So we cover 2 language topics. Okay. This week we talked about tomato, the 2 different pronunciations. And it's definitely expanded beyond it started out quick and dirty tips for better writing, how to use a semicolon, which versus that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And I really expanded into like, wow, isn't language cool? And I just love to talk about etymology and where words come from and, just how fun language can be. So I would love it if people would check out the podcast, and you can get that, anywhere all fine podcasts are free, Apple Podcasts, Spotify.
And they should go there and just search for Quick and Dirty Tips, or search for Grammar Girl, or will both work?
Search for Grammar Girl.
Great.
Yeah. Search for Grammar Girl to come up, the big orange logo with the cartoon girl. Yep. And yeah, that's me.
Fabulous. Well, thank you for being on our show. It was definitely a non-traditional monster, but agreed. Definitely a monster. Definitely a deep, deep Satan worshiper, the Joe Fox. We know the truth. We know the truth. They can hide it all they want, but thank you for being on the show, and delightful to see you again.
You too. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Go back to Maine. I will end this meeting and follow up with her after the fact. You guys, I totally forgot to talk about our upcoming guests. I'm not very good at this yet. I'm working on it. Upcoming guests next week, October 8th. This is going to be delightful. Author Bonnie Burton. We're going to be talking about Killer Clowns from Outer Space, a movie that I, to this date, still have trouble watching again. I will watch it again for this podcast, but I don't like clowns. I don't like them. It is probably the single scariest horror novel I've ever read. Clowns are gross. Clowns are disgusting. If you're a clown and you're in the chat room, I apologize, but go fuck yourself. Can't help you because you scare me a whole bunch. And then the week after that, October 15th, another one of my favorite people, author Mallory O'Meara. She's going to be on to talk about The Creature from the Black Lagoon. She has another book coming out that same week called Girly Drinks, which we're going to talk about. But she has also written the definitive nonfiction novel on the Creature from the Black Lagoon. And then, ladies and gentlemen, the 22nd and the 29th, we're monster free. There will be no monster of the week those weeks because A and I, whoops, back to me. Whoop, boom, boom. Hey, look at that. Yes. A and I have been busting our heinies for a while, and we've got to go watch two of our delightful friends get married, and we're making a whole week of it, and I will not be doing an episode at that point because, you know what? Your friends don't get married all that often. But yes, so that is the situation. As soon as I get Bronson Pinchot rescheduled, I have texted him to ask him if he's available for a date in November. We will get that done. We'll have him back on. I'm super excited about that. I'm super excited about all the guests. Great guests coming up. Great monsters coming up. It's going to be very fun. You are all fantastic. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. Mignon, as usual, is just such a friggin' fascinating person. If you are not listening to the Grammar Girl podcast, I highly recommend it because it's not just entertaining and educational. You will get something out of every single episode that will help you in your business communication, help you in your interpersonal communication, and frankly, it just makes you seem smarter. And we all need a little bit of that. Get that big old head of yours full of knowledge. That is it for this week, you guys. You're wonderful. We'll see you next week with Bonnie Burton talking about those disgusting, nasty ass killer clowns from outer space.